The research ship Explorer rocked gently on the waves of the Pacific Ocean. Dr. James Walker stood on the deck, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The morning sun glinted off the water, making it shimmer like diamonds. But James wasn't interested in what was above the water. His mind was focused on what lay beneath. "Dr. Walker, you should see this," called out Mike, his assistant. Mike had been working with the new quantum resonance scanner in the ship's lab. James hurried below deck. The lab was filled with computers and strange equipment. The centerpiece was the QR-5000, the newest and most powerful scanner for seeing under the ocean floor. It had cost millions to build, but today it would prove its worth. "Look at these readings," Mike said, pointing to a screen filled with colored patterns. "I've never seen anything like this before." James leaned closer. The screen showed a section of ocean floor about 2 miles below them. But instead of the usual rocky patterns, there were perfectly straight lines and sharp angles. "That can't be natural," James said, his heart beating faster. "Nature doesn't make perfect squares." "That's what I thought," Mike said. "And look at this." He pressed a few buttons, and the image zoomed out. The strange pattern wasn't just in one spot. It covered an area the size of a small city. "We need to get a better look," James said. "Prepare the deep-sea drone." An hour later, the team gathered around another screen. The drone was sending back live video as it descended into the dark waters. At first, there was nothing to see but endless blue. Then, as it got deeper, the water turned darker and darker until the drone's lights were the only source of brightness. "We're approaching the site," said Lisa, who was controlling the drone. 2,000 meters and going deeper. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Years of research, countless failed expeditions, and millions in funding had led to this moment. James held his breath as the ocean floor came into view. And there it was. "My God," whispered Mike. The drone's lights revealed a massive structure half buried in the silt. It was clearly not a rock formation. It had a sleek, curved shape, with what looked like windows along one side. It was a ship, but unlike any ship humans had ever built. "It's huge," said Lisa, "at least 200 meters long. And look at the material," James said, pointing to the hull. "It's not metal or wood. I've never seen anything like it." The outer shell had a faint blue-green color that seemed to glow slightly under the drone's lights. There were no signs of rust or decay despite being underwater for what must have been a very long time. "Take samples," James ordered. "We need to know what this thing is made of." The drone extended a mechanical arm and carefully scraped a small piece from the hull. The material came away easily, suggesting it wasn't as hard as metal. "Got it," Lisa said, bringing the drone back up. Later that day, James studied the sample in the ship's lab. The material was lighter than aluminum but stronger than steel. It contained elements that weren't on the periodic table. This wasn't just an unknown ship. It was made of unknown materials. "The carbon dating results are in," Mike said, entering the lab with a printout. "You're not going to believe this." James took the paper and read the numbers, then read them again. "This can't be right," he said. "Run the test again." 3 hours later, the results were the same. The ship was approximately 30,000 years old. That was impossible. Human civilization was only about 10,000 years old. The earliest known boat was a simple canoe dating back 8,000 years. This was something else entirely. "We need to call the university," James said. "And probably the government too." Within days, the discovery was all over the news. Most scientists were skeptical. They suggested errors in the testing or alternative explanations. Some even accused James of faking the whole thing. "They'll see soon enough," James told his team as they continued to map the site. "This is just the beginning." He was more right than he knew. 2 weeks after their initial discovery, similar readings came in from research vessels in the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, and even the Arctic. The patterns were all the same. Giant ships of unknown origin, all approximately 30,000 years old. James was in the middle of a video call with researchers from around the world when Mike burst into his cabin. "James, you need to see this now." The new scans covered a much larger area than before. What they showed was mind-blowing. The ships weren't scattered randomly. They formed a perfect circle around the Earth, like a giant net or web. There are millions of them, James said, his voice barely above a whisper, all deliberately placed. The implications were clear. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a natural phenomenon. This was the work of intelligent beings who had visited Earth long before humans had even learned to farm. "We're looking at the greatest discovery in human history," he told the shocked faces on his screen. "We're not alone in the universe." And we never were. That night, as the explorer floated above the ancient wreck, James stood on the deck again. This time he looked up at the stars instead of down at the ocean. Somewhere out there were the beings who had built these ships. Did they still exist? Would they return once they knew their ships had been found? The biggest question of all kept him awake that night. Why had they hidden their ships under the sea 30,000 years ago? And what would happen now that humans had found them? James didn't know the answers yet, but he was determined to find out. 3 months after the first discovery, the world had changed. Ships from every major country were scattered across the oceans, each searching for more of the ancient vessels. Dr. James Walker had become famous overnight. His face was on TV shows and magazines. People stopped him on the street for photos, but fame wasn't what James wanted. He wanted answers. "The United Nations has called for an emergency meeting," said Mike, reading from his tablet. They were back on land now, in a new research center built just for studying the ships. "All the major powers are fighting over who gets to keep what they find." James shook his head. "These ships don't belong to any country. They belong to everyone, to all of humanity." "Try telling that to the military," Mike replied. "The U.S. Navy took control of our first site last week. It wasn't just the American military that was interested. Russia, China, the European Union, everyone wanted the technology inside those ships. Whatever civilization had built them was thousands of years ahead of current human technology." "Dr. Walker," a woman's voice called from across the room. It was Anna Reed, a brilliant engineer who had joined their team after the discovery went public. "I found something important." James and Mike walked over to her workstation. She had been working on improving the scanning technology to see deeper into the ocean floor. "I modified the quantum resonance scanner," she explained. "I doubled its power and changed how it processes the data." "And?" James asked. She pulled up an image on her screen. It showed the entire Pacific Ocean, but with thousands of bright dots spread across it. "Each dot is a ship," she said. "There are more of them than we thought. Many, many more." James stared at the screen in amazement. "How many are we talking about?" "Millions," Anna said. "And that's just in the Pacific. I'm getting similar readings from the other oceans." She pressed a button and the view expanded to show the whole Earth. It was covered in dots like stars in the night sky. But something else caught James's attention. "They're not random," he said, pointing to patterns in the arrangement. "Look at this. They form shapes like letters or symbols." The team spent the next week analyzing the patterns. The ships weren't just scattered around. They were deliberately placed to form a massive pattern that covered the entire planet. "It's like someone writing a message on the Earth itself," Anna said. "But who was supposed to read it and why hide it under the ocean?" Their work was interrupted when a military officer entered the lab. "Dr. Walker, I'm Colonel Davis. I need you to come with me." "Why?" James asked. "National security," the colonel replied. "We found something you need to see." James was flown to a secret military base in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It was built on a small island surrounded by warships. In the center of the base was a massive hangar. "We recovered this 3 days ago," Colonel Davis said as they entered the hangar. Inside was a section of one of the ships. It was about 50 feet long and glowed with a faint blue light. Dozens of scientists in white lab coats were studying it. "We managed to cut this piece off and bring it to the surface," the colonel explained. "It wasn't easy. The material is harder than diamond once it's out of water." James approached the ship section carefully. Up close, he could see patterns etched into its surface, symbols that looked like writing. Have you been inside it? He asked. The colonel nodded. There's a door on the other side, follow me. The inside of the ship was even more amazing than the outside. The walls were lined with what looked like control panels, but with no buttons or screens, just smooth surfaces. With more symbols, the air was strangely fresh, as if the ship was still alive somehow. We found these, the colonel said, pointing to a row of small, crystal-like objects on a table. They seemed to be some kind of data storage. James picked one up. It was warm, to the touch, and seemed to pulse slightly like a heartbeat. Have you been able to read them? No, the colonel admitted. That's why we brought you here. For the next 2 weeks, James worked with the military scientists to understand the crystals. They tried everything, X-rays, lasers, computers, but nothing worked until Anna had another breakthrough. The ships weren't sunken by accident, she told James during a video call. They were deliberately hidden. How do you know that? James asked. I've been studying the patterns, she said. The way they're arranged, the depth they're buried, it's all too perfect. Someone put them there on purpose. But why? James wondered. To hide them from someone, Anna suggested. Or to wait for something to happen. The next day, one of the military scientists made a discovery. When exposed to a specific frequency of sound, the crystal data storage units lit up and projected symbols into the air. It's like a hologram, James said, watching the floating symbols with awe. But we still can't read it. They needed a linguist, someone who could decipher the alien language. Thomas Ford was the best in the world, having created programs that translated ancient human languages never before understood. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, Thomas said after studying the symbols for a week. But there are patterns, just like in human languages. Give me time. Time was something they might not have. Another ship, this one in the Indian Ocean, had started to move. After 30,000 years of sitting silently on the ocean floor, it was waking up. Something triggered it, Anna told James. Maybe it was our scans or the piece you removed. Or maybe, James said, a chill running down his spine. It was programmed to wake up at this specific time. Maybe whoever put these ships here is coming. Back. As if to confirm his fears, all the ships around the world began to pulse with light, sending signals up through the water toward the stars. The global hunt for answers had taken an unexpected turn. Now humanity wasn't just looking for ancient history. They were preparing for possible first contact. And as James looked at the data coming in from around the world, one thing became clear. The ships hadn't been hidden under the sea by accident. They had been waiting. For 30,000 years they had been waiting, and now the wait was over. Thomas Ford hadn't slept in 3 days. The linguist's office was filled with papers covered in strange symbols, copies of the alien writing found on the ships. Cups of cold coffee sat forgotten on every surface. His eyes were red from staring at screens for too long. But his tired face broke into a smile as Dr. James Walker entered the room. I've got it, Thomas said, his voice hoarse but excited. Or at least I've got the basics. James couldn't believe it. You can read their language? How? It's not as alien as we thought, Thomas explained, pulling up images on his computer. All languages have patterns. This one uses a system based on mathematics, specifically prime numbers. Once I figured that out, the rest started to make sense. He showed James a series of symbols and their translations. This means star, Thomas said, pointing to one symbol. This means ship, and this... He paused, pointing to a complex pattern. This means human. James stared at the symbol. They knew about us 30,000 years ago? Thomas nodded. According to what I've translated so far, they called themselves the Guardians. They were an advanced civilization that traveled between stars. They visited Earth during the last ice age. Over the next few hours, Thomas explained what he had learned. The Guardians had found Earth while exploring this part of the galaxy. They discovered early humans, primitive but with potential. They watched as our ancestors hunted, made tools, and painted on cave walls. But they were worried about us, Thomas said. The records mention our aggressive nature and territorial instincts. They saw how we fought each other over resources. So they left? James asked. Thomas shook his head. They were forced to leave. According to the translations, they were fleeing from some kind of disaster, something about a wave of darkness coming through the galaxy. And the ships? James asked. Why leave them here? They couldn't take everything with them, Thomas explained. So they hid their technology where primitive humans couldn't reach it, deep under the oceans. They planned to return one day when the danger had passed. But they never came back, James said. Thomas's face grew serious. That's the thing. I think they might be coming now. When we disturbed the first ship, it seems we activated some kind of beacon, a distress signal. As if to confirm his words, James's phone rang. It was Anna. James, you need to see this, she said, her voice shaking slightly. Turn on any news channel. James grabbed the remote and switched on the TV in Thomas's office. Every channel showed the same thing, a massive object in Earth's orbit. It wasn't a satellite or space station, it was a ship, identical in design to the ones under the oceans, but 100 times larger. It just appeared, Anna said over the phone. No warning. 1 minute there was nothing, then there was a flash of light, and there it was. The world was in panic. Military forces were on high alert. News reporters speculated wildly about invasion or the end of the world. But James felt something different, a strange sense of anticipation. After 30,000 years, the Guardians had returned. 3 days later, James, Thomas, Anna, and representatives from major world governments gathered at a military base. The alien ship had sent a message, in multiple human languages, including English, Chinese, Russian, and Arabic. They wanted to meet. A smaller vessel had descended from the mothership and landed at the designated meeting point. As they waited for the doors to open, James wondered what the Guardians would look like. Would they be humanoid? Completely alien? Something in between? The ship's door slid open silently. Light poured out, temporarily blinding everyone. When James could see again, he gasped. The being that stepped out looked almost human, tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large, deep eyes. It wore simple clothing that seemed to shimmer and change colors slightly as it moved. "We are the Guardians," it said in perfect English, its voice melodic and calm. "We have returned as promised." The alien, who introduced himself as Keeper, was shocked to find humans had advanced so quickly. In their calculations, humanity should still be using basic tools and living in small settlements. "Your evolution has been unexpected," Keeper said as they sat in a conference room. "When we left, your kind used stone tools and had just discovered fire. Now you build machines that can think and have walked on your moon." "We're quick learners," James said with a small smile. But Keeper's next words wiped the smile from his face. "You must stop your excavations immediately," the alien said. "The ships were hidden for a reason." "What reason?" asked the American president, who was attending via video conference. "Your world was placed under quarantine," Keeper explained. "Your species showed great potential, but also concerning tendencies toward violence and destruction. The Council of Guardians decided to let you develop naturally, without interference. The ships contain technology you are not ready for." "Who are you to decide what we're ready for?" James asked, feeling a flash of anger. Keeper turned those deep eyes on him. "We have seen civilizations destroy themselves with technologies they weren't prepared to control. The ships contain weapons that could devastate not just your world, but entire star systems." The room fell silent as everyone took in this information. "But there's more," Keeper continued. "The ships were also hidden to protect you. If our enemies knew of your existence, they would come here and enslave your people, or worse." "Your enemies?" James asked. "The wave of darkness mentioned in your records?" Keeper looked surprised. "You've translated our language? Impressive." The alien nodded. "Yes, they call themselves the Harvesters. They consume worlds and the energy of living beings. We fought them for centuries before we were forced to flee to the far reaches of the galaxy." "Are they still out there?" Thomas asked. "Yes," Keeper said simply. And if they detect the energy signatures from our old ships, they will come here. That is why you must stop your excavations and return what you have found to the depths. The human representatives looked at each other uncertain. Give up the greatest discovery in human history, return to being alone in the universe, ignorant of what lay beyond the stars? James stood up. No, he said firmly. We won't stop learning. We won't hide from the truth. If these harvesters are still a threat, then we need to prepare, not bury, our heads in the sand. Keeper's expression was unreadable. You speak bravely, but you don't understand the danger. Then help us understand, James replied. Teach us. Work with us. We've survived ice ages, plagues, and our own wars. We're stronger than you think. For a long moment, Keeper said nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, the alien's mouth curved into what might have been a smile. Perhaps, Keeper said, you have evolved further than we anticipated. What happened next would change the course of human history forever. 2 weeks after first contact, a special meeting was called. Representatives from all major countries gathered in a secure conference room at the United Nations building in New York. Keeper, the Guardian ambassador, sat at one end of the long table. Captain Mark Stone of the newly formed International Space Coalition sat at the other. The room was tense. Earlier that day, Keeper had delivered an ultimatum. Earth had 7 days to return all recovered artifacts to the sea and stop all research on the ships. If humans refused, the Guardians would take the artifacts by force. We understand your concern, Captain Stone began, his voice steady despite the pressure. But we cannot simply abandon this knowledge. It belongs to all of humanity now. Keeper's large eyes blinked slowly. You still do not understand the danger. The technology in those ships could destroy your civilization. Or it could help us advance by centuries, replied the representative from Japan. We have already learned how to create new materials based on the ship's hull. Materials that could help us build better homes, better hospitals, and better weapons, Keeper added. We have seen this pattern on 100 worlds. First come the medical advances, then the weapons. Mark leaned forward. With respect, you're judging us based on what we were 30,000 years ago. We've grown. We've learned. Yes, we still have wars and conflicts, but we also have art, music, literature. We explore not just to conquer, but to understand. Pretty words, said Keeper. But your actions tell a different story. Our scans show your militaries are already attempting to reverse engineer our propulsion systems. The room fell silent. It was true. We need to defend ourselves, said the Russian representative finally. You've told us about these harvesters. If they're as dangerous as you claim, shouldn't we be prepared? Keeper stood up. His 7-foot frame made everyone else look small. The harvesters would crush you like insects. Your most advanced weapons would be toys to them. The only way to survive is to remain hidden. Hide and hope they never find us, Mark asked. That's not the human way. Then perhaps the human way leads to extinction, Keeper replied coldly. The meeting ended without resolution. The ultimatum stood: 7 days to comply or face consequences. Back at the research facility, James, Anna, and Thomas worked frantically to understand as much as they could before the deadline. The Guardian ship is still in orbit, Anna said, looking at satellite feeds on her tablet. But 3 more have arrived in the last hour. James nodded grimly. They're preparing to take back their technology by force if necessary. Can we really fight them? Thomas asked. Their ships can travel between stars. Ours can barely reach the moon. We might not have to fight, James said, studying the crystal data storage unit in his hand. There's something not right about all this. Why hide millions of ships? Why not just take them when they left? And why did they look so much like us? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Helen Grant, a geneticist, burst into the lab waving a folder of papers. You need to see this, she said, spreading the papers on the table. I've been studying the DNA samples we found on the ships, comparing them to human DNA. James looked at the complex charts and graphs. What am I looking at? Similarities, Helen said excitedly. Too many similarities. The Guardian DNA and human DNA share 85% of the same markers. That's impossible unless we're related, James finished, his mind racing with the implications. Helen nodded. Either they evolved from us, or we evolved from them. Given the timeline, I'd say we're their descendants. The team stared at each other in shock. Humans were related to the Guardians. It seemed impossible, yet the evidence was right in front of them. We need to tell Captain Stone, James said. This changes everything. The next day, Mark Stone requested another meeting with Keeper. This time, only Mark, James, and a few key scientists attended. We've made a discovery, Mark said, pushing the genetic reports across the table. One that I think you already know about. Keeper looked at the papers but didn't touch them. His expression remained unreadable. We're related to you, aren't we? James asked directly. That's why you look so much like us. That's why you came to Earth in the first place. For a long moment, Keeper said nothing. Then he sighed, a very human gesture. Yes, he admitted. Your people are distant cousins to ours. We visited many worlds, seeding life where conditions were right. Earth was one such world, though your evolution took an unexpected path. You created us? Mark asked, stunned. No, Keeper said. We merely guided early development. Your species evolved on its own, much faster than we anticipated. When we returned, we expected to find primitive beings still learning to use tools. Instead, we found a spacefaring civilization on the verge of joining the galactic community. Is that why you want us to stay hidden? To protect us, James asked. Partly, Keeper replied, but also because we fear what you might become. You evolved to survive on a dangerous planet. You are more aggressive, more adaptive than we are. Your technology advances at a frightening pace. And you're afraid of us, Mark realized. Not just for us. Keeper's silence confirmed it. Listen to me, Mark said, his voice firm but respectful. We don't want to be your enemies. We don't want to conquer the galaxy. But we won't live in fear and we won't give up what we've learned. There must be a middle ground. There is no middle ground with the harvesters, Keeper warned. They will sense the energy from our ships and come to investigate. When they find you, humans with Guardian technology, they will destroy your entire planet. Then help us, James urged. Don't force us back into ignorance. Teach us to defend ourselves. You cannot, Keeper began, but was interrupted by an alarm from his wrist device. His blue skin paled visibly. It's too late, he said, reading the alien symbols on the device. A Harvester scout ship has entered your solar system. They detected the energy surge when you activated the first ship. The room erupted in panic. Questions flew from all sides. How much time did they have? What weapons would work against the Harvesters? Should they evacuate major cities? Mark's voice cut through the chaos. How long until they reach Earth? 3 days, Keeper replied. Maybe 4. Mark looked around the room, at the faces of the scientists and leaders who now carried the fate of humanity on their shoulders. Then he turned back to Keeper. Then we have 3 days to prepare, he said calmly, and we'll need your help. For the first time since they'd met him, Keeper looked uncertain. You cannot win this fight. Maybe not, Mark agreed. But we will fight anyway. That's what humans do. The Guardian stared at Mark for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Perhaps, he said. That is why we were right to fear you. The next 3 days were the most frantic in human history. People around the world watched the skies with fear and wonder. Some panicked and fled to bunkers. Others gathered in churches, mosques, and temples to pray. But most did what humans had always done in the face of danger. They prepared to fight. At the underwater research base, now the command center for Earth's defense, James Walker worked alongside Anna, Thomas, and scientists from around the world. They had a desperate plan. The ancient weapons are our only hope, James told Captain Mark Stone as they stood in front of the largest piece of recovered ship. If we can activate them before the harvester reaches Earth orbit, we might have a chance. Can you make them work? Mark asked. Keeper says they were designed to respond only to Guardian DNA. James smiled. That's the one piece of good news we have. Remember, we share 85% of our DNA with the Guardians. Helen has been testing the systems with human DNA samples. Some of us can activate the technology. Some of us? Mark asked. People with a specific genetic marker, James explained. About 1 in 20 humans has it, a direct link to our Guardian ancestors. Helen calls it the star gene. Mark looked skeptical. And you have this gene? I do. James nodded. So does Anna. We've been testing the weapons systems all night. Across the room, Anna was working with a team to connect the ancient ship's power core to modern systems. The core glowed with blue-green light, pulsing like a heartbeat. The problem isn't making them work, James continued. It's understanding how to control them. These weapons are beyond anything we've ever seen. Keeper, who had been watching silently, stepped forward. I will help you, he said, surprising everyone in the room. The Council will not approve, but I cannot watch your species die when you fight with such courage. Over the next 48 hours, Keeper taught them how to use the Guardian weapons. The most powerful was something called a gravity lance, a weapon that could create a temporary black hole, powerful enough to tear apart even the largest ships. Be careful, Keeper warned as James practiced the control gestures. Too much power and you could damage your own planet. The weapons respond to emotion as well as command. Meanwhile, governments around the world prepared their conventional forces for all the good they would do. Fighter jets were armed and ready. Missile silos were opened. Nuclear submarines moved into position. They're brave, Keeper said, watching the military preparations on a monitor. But their weapons will do nothing against harvester shields. It's not about winning, Mark told him. It's about standing together. Fighting together. The harvester ship entered Earth orbit exactly as Keeper had predicted. It was massive, at least 5 miles long, covered in jagged spines that made it look like a metal sea urchin. It blocked out the sun over North America, casting a shadow that chilled everyone who saw it. It's scanning us, Keeper said, reading the data on his wrist device. Looking for the Guardian energy signatures. When it finds the ships, it will attack. Then we attack first, Mark ordered. The plan was simple but dangerous. Using the gravity lance would require getting close to the harvester ship. James and Anna would pilot a modified spacecraft carrying the ancient weapon. Earth's military forces would provide a distraction. As they prepared to launch, Keeper approached James one last time. There is something you should know, the Guardian said quietly. The Council did not send me here to help you return the ships. They sent me to determine if humans were ready to join the galactic community. And what did you decide? James asked. Keeper's lips curved in that almost smile. I'm helping you fight the harvesters. What do you think I decided? The launch went smoothly. James and Anna piloted the craft toward the harvester ship, hiding in the shadow of Earth to avoid early detection. Behind them, the combined air forces of Earth's nations flew in formation, a display of unity never before seen in human history. They've spotted us, Anna said as alarms blared. The harvester ship was turning, its weapons ports opening like dark, hungry mouths. All forces engage, Mark ordered from the command center. The sky lit up with missiles and laser fire. The human weapons couldn't penetrate the harvester shields, but they served their purpose: distraction. James and Anna flew directly at the massive alien ship, dodging energy beams that could vaporize mountains. We're in position, James reported. Activating gravity lance. He placed his hand on the ancient control panel. It glowed in response to his touch, recognizing the Guardian genes in his DNA. The ship hummed with power as the weapon charged, but something was wrong. It's not working properly, James said, panic rising in his voice. The targeting system won't lock on. They're shields, Keeper explained through the radio. The harvesters have adapted since our last encounter. Anna's face showed grim determination. Then we'll have to get closer, inside their shields. That's suicide, Keeper warned. Maybe, Anna replied, but it's our only chance. James nodded, and they pushed the engines to full power, flying straight at the harvester ship. Enemy fire blazed around them, some shots hitting their craft and damaging the outer hull. Shields at 30%, Anna reported. We won't survive another direct hit. They were close now, so close they could see the details of the alien hull, the strange patterns that covered its surface. Now! James shouted, activating the gravity lance again. This time the weapon responded fully. A beam of blue-white light shot from their ship, striking the harvester at point-blank range. For a moment nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to fold inward, creating a swirling vortex of darkness that began to tear the enemy ship apart. It's working, Anna cried, but our ship is being pulled in too. The gravity was too strong, drawing them toward the artificial black hole. Their engines strained against the pull but couldn't break free. Then, to their surprise, 3 Guardian ships appeared, firing tractor beams that locked onto their craft. The Council changed their mind. Keeper's voice came through the radio. They decided humans were worth saving after all. The Guardian ships pulled them to safety as the harvester vessel collapsed into the gravity well, crushed into nothingness. The temporary black hole winked out of existence, leaving only scattered debris. When James and Anna returned to Earth, they were greeted as heroes. The world had watched the battle through satellite feeds. Humans had stood together against an impossible threat, and won. 1 month later, a formal meeting was held at the United Nations. Keeper, now officially the Guardian ambassador to Earth, addressed the gathered leaders. For 30,000 years we watched your evolution from afar, he said. We feared you. We doubted you. We underestimated you. Today I am proud to announce that the Guardian Council has voted unanimously to end Earth's quarantine. Humanity is now recognized as a spacefaring civilization and invited to join the Galactic Alliance. As the room erupted in cheers and applause, James looked at Anna and smiled. The ships that had been hidden under the sea for 30,000 years had not just changed human history, they had opened the door to humanity's future among the stars. And as the celebration continued around them, James couldn't help but wonder what other secrets might be waiting to be discovered, now that humanity had taken its first real steps into the vast unknown universe.